He's been holding for a wee while now, has Michael Nugent of Atheist Ireland. I tried to bring him in a while ago and had the wrong button pressed. Michael, good morning.
Good morning. I assume God took time out of his busy day to cut me off earlier on.
I'm sure he did. Churches closing because of a lack of priests must be music to your ears.
Well, I think it's just inevitable. They're not. I mean, they're closing in Ireland, but they're not closing internationally. The Catholic Church is a global institution, and it's growing in the global south. More than 2/3 of Roman Catholics now live in Southeast Asia, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and in South and Central America. So that's where the Catholic Church is growing. And most Catholics in the global north don't take the teachings of the Church seriously, and they're kind of a la carte Catholics. So the Church is now focusing on where its market is, which is the south, where people are more likely to believe in the Bible as a literal word of God, where they're more likely to believe in miracles and possessions and exorcisms. The current Pope recently endorsed an organisation of exorcists in the Vatican, and where they're far more likely to be very conservative on sexual morality issues. And so that's really the direction that the Church is going in, and Ireland is just part of that overall pattern.
Mm. And how does that go down with you? I mean, clearly, would you like to see the Church done away with, Michael?
No, I'm quite happy with people to believe whatever they want to believe, as long as they're not imposing on others, which unfortunately they do in Ireland, because although the Catholic Church doesn't have the control over the population that it used to have, it still has the laws that were put in place when it did have the control, and so the education.
Michael, we did hear earlier on this morning that perhaps one of the reasons why some schools can refuse to take on certain types of class is because of a religious ethos. Now, that's a serious problem.
It is, but the government are almost kind of making a fetish out of this, of saying, well, there's a constitutional problem, so we can't do anything. That's not the case at all. The courts have consistently said that it is the role of the legislature to balance different constitutional rights, and that it is the role of the courts then to determine whether they've got it right or not, whether they've got that balance right or wrong. But if the government were to pass a more progressive law, all of the indications are that the courts would endorse that, because the courts tend to presume constitutionality in laws that the Oireachtas make. So the government is basically just using that as an excuse to not do anything. On an earlier thing, by the way, when Jim was talking about women priests, and you were asking where in the Bible it says it, just to help Jim out a bit, in 1 Corinthians 14 it says the women should remain silent in churches and they're not allowed to speak and must be in submission. And then Paul says in Timothy 2:12, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man, she must be quiet. So while that's obviously a ridiculous position in modern secular society where we recognise equality of genders, that is the biblical basis of it.
I'm amazed that an atheist can quote the Bible so well.
Know your enemy, PJ.
So most atheists are far more familiar with it than most religious people.
Yeah, I think
and the Quran, because we think about it. We look it up, and because you tend to be born into a religious ethos, so you have to think about it to move out of it.
I have to say, to be fair, it does sound like Jim thinks about it a lot. It's just that maybe not the same.
Maybe he stopped thinking about it 60 years ago.
Yeah, a very interesting message here from somebody who says that. He himself, he's a 30-year-old man with a very strong faith. However, as I've said before, the Bible is open to interpretation. Jim's attitude is one of his time, which was rigid and harsh, used to maintain control and order. Now the Catholic Church is going through a crisis because of all the troubles that have occurred, and we haven't properly acted on the past. It's time the Catholic Church caught up with the modern way of thinking and practice what they preach. Acceptance. This is why the Church is suffering. See, Michael, there is, there are Catholics out there who, Elaine earlier and this young man who both believe that the Church is salvageable, that there is good in it. I mean, as an atheist, I suppose, obviously you don't believe in the tenets of it, but can the Church be a good thing?
Well, I think community can be a good thing, and people being kind to each other can be a good thing, or is a good thing. But these are just human things. They're not religious attributes. Morality is based on things like empathy and compassion and reciprocity and cooperation and fairness and justice. And they're things that anybody can do regardless of whether they're religious or not. What religion tends to do, unfortunately, is to override those and say, here are situations such as LGBT treatment or other things, where even though it's clear that this is the compassionate thing to do. You shouldn't do it because somebody wrote something in a book, several hundred years ago or several thousand years ago. Yeah. But I don't think, by the way, that the sex abuse scandals are the issue. I think even without the sex abuse scandals, the pattern is that the world is becoming more secular, and particularly in the developed world. And it's as much to do with, say things like declining family sizes, so it's less likely that somebody in a family of one or two kids is going to become a priest. There's the celibacy requirement, obviously, is another issue. But it's just generally people are becoming more secular around the world, and there is a tendency then, as most people become more secular, some people will resist that and become more fundamentalist. So you get a rise in both secularism and fundamentalism at the same time.
Very interesting topic, Mick, and we'll have you on again, I'm sure, about this.